Have you ever left a school meeting or an appointment feeling unheard, frustrated, or even doubting yourself? Hello, and welcome to the Marvellous-U Podcast. If you have not already subscribed to this channel, please subscribe, leave a comment, and share. Thank you. Have you ever left a school meeting or an appointment feeling unheard, frustrated, or even doubting yourself? Like you knew something wasn't right for your child, but didn't know how to say it or who would listen. If you are a parent or carer, especially navigating schools, special education needs meetings, or professionals, this episode is for you. In today's video, I'm sharing how to advocate for your child with confidence, what to say, how to prepare, and how to make sure your child's needs don't get overlooked. Because your voice matters and your child needs you to use it. I will quickly share a personal story of when I had to advocate for my child's needs. My son has an educational health and care plan. And while he was in primary school, he always had learning support assistants. He loves school and he has always loved his learning support assistants. But when he was around 9 years old, I believe, his regular learning support assistant had to go on maternity, and a new person had to play that role. After a while, my son began refusing to get ready for school in the morning. For somebody who likes school so much, this was quite shocking. And for us as his parents, this was frustrating and emotionally draining. And because of his condition of brittle bone, you really do not want to struggle with him while trying to dress him up because of the worry of causing harm or breaking his bone. We were confused. We didn't understand why there was this sudden change in his behavior. And so on this day where we woke up trying to get him ready for school, his dad took him to school after so much struggle and delay. And while leaving him off at the reception with the learning support assistant, he started resisting going in with her. The dad was worried and concerned. And at this stage, the learning support assistant presented in such a way that made us realize that she was the person that was making my son not want to come to school. This was quite shocking. We tried to get my son to explain what the issue was. But because of his, delayed speech and inability to express himself, he wasn't really saying much. All he was saying was that he didn't want to go to school just because he didn't want to be with this learning support assistant. I asked to speak with the school SENCO, which is the special education needs officer. And I told her that this is the new experience we're having with our son. We know that he loves to be in school. He loves his friends. He loves his playtimes. And suddenly he's refusing to come to school, and it's becoming really frustrating dressing him up in the morning because all he keeps saying is, I don't want to go to school. After speaking with the SENCO, I requested for a change of the learning support assistant. I thought my worries were taken on board. I thought I was heard. But shockingly, I was ignored. And the next day, the same learning support assistant who my son did not want to be with was there to receive him. At this point, I was getting really frustrated and angry. I refused to release my son, and I asked to see the special education needs officer, who was the SENCO. And when she came, I told her, I said, I have already told you that there is something wrong between my son and his learning support assistant, and I've requested for you to change to another learning support assistant so that he will be comfortable staying in school. And she told me that they are not able to do that. They don't have anybody else, and she has to be the one to be with him. At this stage, I knew that I was not going to allow my son to go through this discomfort of being with someone that he didn't want to be with. At this point, we couldn't really get from him what the issue was. I refused to leave him at school that day. I took him home. I went to see his GP and I explained to the doctor, because I wanted to be able to get the doctor to speak to him so that we could know exactly what the issue was. I left the room and the doctor tried to interview my son. And all he could say was that she's being rude to me. Until this very moment, I still do not know the full weight of that word. She's being rude to me. I've not been able to unpack that whole statement because he couldn't say more than that. And when the school ignored my request to change his LSA, I made a formal complaint. I wrote to the head teacher and I said, this is what is happening. This is my request. I want a new LSA for my child. Because he's been in this school for well over 4 years. He's always enjoyed school and there's this sudden change of behavior. I want a new LSA for him. The head teacher also ignored my request. They kept insisting that there was nobody else to be his LSA. At this point, I had to escalate. I contacted the safeguarding officer from the council, from the local authority, and also wrote to the education officer, and also to the person in charge of the families with disabilities, of children with disabilities. At this point, we had to have a meeting. And at that meeting, the school tried to make it look like my son was the problem and we were the problem. But at the end of the day, by being calm and staying, on the major request, the one request that I already made, which was to change my son learning support assistant. With the intervention of the people from the local authority, that request was honored. A new learning support assistant was provided for my son. And in addition to that, I also requested that this new learning support assistant would be the only learning support assistant that will remain with him until he gets to level 6, where he will write his year 11 exams and leave the primary school. And that was also put in place. And that was how we were able to ensure that my son's needs were met and he was with someone that he could relate with. And honestly, until this day, I've not been able to unpack that statement that his LSA was being rude to him. Why did I share this story? I'm sharing this story because I want you to know that you are your child's voice when they can't express their needs. Before we go any further, let me say this clearly. You don't need to be a lawyer, a teacher, or a medical professional to advocate for your child. You just need clarity, confidence, and the right tools. I'm sharing this not just as a psychology student or an author, but as a mom and a carer who has sat in those meetings, felt dismissed, and had to learn how to speak up when it mattered most. Maybe you have experienced this too. You prepare what you want to say, but when you are in the room, the language feels intimidating. You nod along, the meeting ends, and later you think, that's not what I meant. Or maybe I should have said more. Or I don't think I was heard. That feeling can leave you questioning yourself. And it shouldn't. In this episode, I'm going to walk you through how to advocate for your child in a way that is calm, confident, and effective. Whether you're speaking to a teacher, to your senku, the GP, therapist, or any professional involved in your child's care, we will talk about what advocacy really means, how to prepare for meetings, and how to make sure your child's needs are taken seriously without feeling confrontational or overwhelmed. The goal in every advocacy is collaboration, not confrontation. And stay with me until the end, because I also share one simple mindset shift that completely changed how I showed up in meetings and helped me to stop feeling small or apologetic when speaking about my child. I need you to understand your role. What is the most important thing every parent needs to know about advocacy? For you to be able to advocate for your child, you need to know your rights. And this implies knowing your education, health and care plan or your special education needs support if you have one, especially here in the UK. The EHCPs that you have or the SEND report that you have is a document that you need to read and understand every section of that document, because your child's educational health and care plan is laid out, completely laid out in that document. And if you don't know what is there, if you don't understand that document, then you will not know what your child needs and how you can advocate for your child. Another thing you need is to build positive relationship with teachers and health professionals. This is very crucial. For every person that interacts with your child, it is important that your relationship that you have with them is mutual, is respectful, and is positive. And you can do this in different ways. One of the ways I do is to make sure that I'm always in touch, in contact with these people, whoever works with my child. I'm always in contact with them. I always like to share every information about what is happening at home and also find out about what is happening in school. So building that positive relationship is very, very vital. And the third thing is to document everything. It is important that you have a record of every interaction that you have with professionals when it comes to advocating for your child. This is one of the major roles you have to play. Emails, reports, and meeting notes are not documents that you should play with. Document everything. Now let's look at how we can practically advocate for our children or for our child. The first thing you need to do is to be prepared. Write key points before meetings. When I had to advocate for my child regarding his learning support assistant that was causing him grief, the first contact was casual with the Senko. But then it felt like I was ignored. Immediately that happened, I had to write. I had to write to the head teacher, and I had to make sure that I was prepared. And one of the ways I was prepared was to also go into the school and read up their policy regarding safeguarding children. I was able to bring out all of the key points regarding children and safeguarding and the school's responsibility towards the child. So you have to be prepared. Look at the EHCP, and when you have meetings, what are the key points? Raise them. Make sure they are noted down before the meetings. The second thing you have to do is to stay calm but firm. When I went back to the school and the same learning support assistant was presented to me, it was very easy for me to have flared up. Yes, my emotion would have been valid, and our emotions are valid. But the truth is, clarity is powerful. So instead of being emotional, stay calm but firm. I was calm. I looked at the Senko and I said, I'm sorry, I've already requested for you to replace this LSA. If you are not going to give me another LSA, I'm not leaving my child in school. I took my son and I left. Another step, which is the third step, is to use we language. When you use the we language, you're opening up the conversation so that it is collaborative. So, for example, we would like to explore ways to support. In my own case, I'll say we would like for this LSA to be changed because he has had previous LSA and he has never had any issue with them. I think it's important that we put the child needs ahead of every other need. So when we use that, we are inviting collaboration. And the first stage in practical advocacy is to follow up in writing. Remember I said that my first contact with the SENCO was casual, but when I felt ignored, I had to follow up in writing. I wrote to the head teacher and I brought her in to understand what was going on. And this keeps accountability. Because when you write, there is no way anybody can deny what was said and what was not said. And the fifth thing I had to do was to find allies. At this point, you need your parent forums. You need charities, if you belong to a charity organization, or mentors. I had to reach out to parent forums. I had to find out who else has been in this kind of situation before. And these people are very, very important when it comes to advocating for your child. Because riding on the experience of a parent who has been on this journey, they will support you and they will help you. In my son's case, I went to speak to the GP. I spoke to other parents, and I also reached out to the local authority body that was in charge of families, children and young persons with disability. So sometimes in advocating for your child, the answer is negative. What do you say when the answer is no? When the response is negative? What do you say? For example, a school or a professional denies a request for support or an assessment or a specific service verbally. For example, we just don't think he needs an aid right now, or we don't think that he needs a new LSA because there is nobody else. As was in my case when I requested for a new LSA. What do you say? You could say something like, I understand that is your decision, or understand that is your stand, but for my records, please can you put that refusal in writing, along with the specific data or policy you are using to make that determination. Because in my case, when I had to write to the head teacher, I needed a refusal in writing. And I also had to find out the school policy regarding children's safeguarding. So it is important that you request for a refusal in writing. The reason you do this is that when the refusal that was verbal is put in writing, they know that it's more serious. And they know that if it's pulled up, they will have to defend it. And so it brings about accountability. Another example could be you are told, we don't do that here, or we've never done that before. For example, maybe you are requesting for an extra time for a test or a sensory break. Like in my son's case, there was a time I was requesting that he should have a break from his wheelchair so that he's not sitting upright all the time. What if you are told no, that cannot happen? You could, use a script like this and say, can you clarify for me, is that a written policy or is that just current practice? If it is a policy, could you please provide me with a copy of it today? When you do that, you're helping to hold them accountable to make sure that whatever denial you are refusing is not just a practice, but it's a policy. It's important that you check this, and that is why I said when it came to advocating for my son, I needed to go through what the school policy on safeguarding is, and also to go through my son's education, health and care plan. And in his EHCP, he's entitled to a learning support assistant. And in his refusal to work with the current LSA, it was the school duty to provide a replacement. Advocating for our children can be emotionally draining. and frustrating. And I want to acknowledge that, because it often goes unnoticed how the emotional aspect of advocacy is. When I had to take my child from school because I felt ignored, I knew how emotionally draining that was for me. So advocating for your child is not just about filling out forms, attending meetings, or sending emails. It involves emotional labor. It requires walking into rooms where you feel outnumbered and maintaining your composure even when your heart is racing. It means carrying the fear of, what if I don't say the right thing? When I had to sit in a meeting between myself, my family, my husband and my son, and the school management team and those from the local authority, I felt outnumbered. But I remember my husband, reminding me to be calm, to make sure that I do not rush my words, to make sure that I was not emotional. So it's emotionally draining because the image I was presenting was far separated from the way I was feeling inside. So if you have ever left a meeting feeling exhausted, tearful, or uncertain about yourself, please understand this. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It means you care deeply. Advocacy can feel burdensome because it stems from love. And that love is not a weakness. It is your greatest strength. So what is the golden rule here? The golden rule is the rule of tone. So my husband will say, speak slowly and calmly, and make sure you have a pen in hand so that it looks like you're going to write. It helps to control your emotion. You don't need to be angry. The words you say carry the weight, so you don't have to raise your voice. This can be difficult, and that is why you must always have an ally. Sitting down in that meeting, having my husband by my side was what helped me to maintain my tone in advocating for my child. So, if you are going through this, I want you to know that I see you. The emotions that comes with advocacy is very, very exhausting. But remember, you are your child's safe place and your child's strongest voice. Before I go, I'd like to leave you with this. If you have children that are still in school or that you are caring for as a caregiver, I would like you to create an advocacy binder or a digital folder to help you keep organized. You need to be organized when it comes to advocating for your child. Every letter, every email, everything has to be in place because you will need them. Your child does not need a perfect advocate. They just need a parent that is present. And as parents, we cannot ignore when our children need us. We need to be their voice. But advocacy is not about being loud. It's about being clear, consistent, and compassionate. And that is what we all need to do as parents, as the voice for our children. So if this episode has helped you feel more confident, better informed, or simply less alone, please consider subscribing to the Marvellous-U Podcast. Also, you can share this episode with another parent or caregiver who could use some encouragement today. I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear your story. Feel free to comment below or connect with me on social media and let me know. What is one situation where you would like to advocate more confidently for your child? Your voice matters. Your child matters. if you don't speak up for them, who will? Thank you for listening and watching.